Ready. And action.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again with Professor Victor Singingeagle here at Sisseton, Wahpeton College. Native American literature. And without any further ado, let us begin with the man himself, the brilliant Professor Victor Singingeagle.
Yay! Right on. Boy, I'm messing up my voice with that one. Now, what are we doing today? Let's go back to our lesson plan. Shall we? Here we go. We are going to discuss our textbook, Why Indigenous Literatures Matter. The reason why I'm going to torture you with this book right now is it's going to lead nicely into the second part. That should actually say, let's see, 3, 4, yeah, it's going to lead, these two are going to connect very well, as we'll see. So, if you got your book, open it up to page 24, 25, and down to 20, 21, and follow along. Now, again, I don't normally read to my students, but every once in a while I like to throw this stuff out at you to keep your eyes open. Here we go. Native American literature. Why Indigenous lives matter, and why am I bringing this up? You will see as we go along. So we're going to start with page 24, 25. This is on the oral tradition. Daniel Heath Justice on the oral tradition. Because you see, Daniel Heath Justice and other writers and storytellers have a problem, you see, with literature. Well, let me just read it. It says here, we're going to start on page 24. At the bottom, while the works I discuss here speak certain truths of their own, they're not the totality of indigenous or rhetorical, literary, or artistic expression or experience. I'm messing this up. And there are limits in the kinds of insight they can provide, just as there are limits to any insights I can give to the works discussed therein. They're just one part of a much larger, more diverse and dynamic, expressive, critical archive, yet another important reason for folks to read widely and with broad interest. Now, we're going to skip down to the bottom of the page 25. One caveat. Every time we privilege the literary, we run the risk of doing violence to the specific relational contexts of the oral. Ooh, that's so good, I better read it again. Every time we privilege the literary, we run the risk of doing violence to the specific relational context of the oral. He's speaking primarily of the oral tradition. What does he mean by doing violence when we turn it literal? Let's keep reading, shall we? Reading can be a very isolated and isolating experience. Sharing stories orally is done in the context of living, dynamic peoplehood. One reason why it's so significant to indigenous communities, where so much knowledge is transmitted between living people, not mediated by objects like books. Now, this kind of reminds me a little bit. I'm going to stop a second. You know how I am. I love to yak too much. But this concept of the oral tradition in my tribe, it's only the males who tell stories. We do have female stories, and they have their stories, but mostly when we gather around in the winter time and have stories, it's usually the old guys, the old males, that are the story keepers. There's a reason for that. I wish I could ask my grandfather, but he's up on the Milky Way now. But there is a special sacred reason for why the males are the story keepers in our clan. But never mind, I'm going to get back to this. It says here, Leanne Betasama- Betasamake. Betasamosake Simpson offers a vital caution on this point, which I quote at length. The relationship between those present become dynamic, with the storyteller adjusting the performance based on the reaction and presence of the audience. This is actually kind of true. I used to tell stories to little kids in Spokane. I'm pronouncing it the wrong language. I guess pronounce that in English. Spokane area elementary schools. And one of the things I used to do was wander around from school to school, and I'd tell stories to the children. And based upon their responses, how the kids replied and how they oohed and ahed as I told the stories is what things I can take and run away with, or what things I better skip and keep rolling. It's very similar to the way stand-up comics act these days. But never mind. Let's stay focused on this because we want to stay sacred, not comical. Sometimes the two overlap, but that's another story. The lines between story and storyteller and audience become blurred as individuals make nonverbal and sometimes verbal contributions to the collective event. Ooh, the collective event. The performance, whether a song, a dance, or a spoken word story, becomes then an individual and collective experience, with a goal of lifting the burden of colonialism by visioning new realities. Ooh, I like that. In my tribe, we say the stories actually have lives of their own, and in the telling of the stories, we rebreathe new life into these stories. They become sacred, and you can't abuse them. Let's keep rolling. This is now on page 26. Continuing the long quote. While this is now also accomplished by Indigenous artists through the written word, spoken word, theater, performance art, visual art, music and rap, film and video, it is most powerful in terms of transformation in its original cultural context, because that context places dynamic relationships at the core. Dynamic relationships. Got it? When mediated through print or recording devices, these relationships become either reduced, technology that limits interactivity, or unilateral, as in print, film, or video, when the creator cannot respond to the reaction of the audience. Then the process, to me, loses some of its transformative power because it is no longer emergent. Ooh. Ooh. Let's keep reading. Now, we're on page 26, right in the middle. Following along? I hope so. It is no surprise, therefore, that Simpson is a spoken word performer and musician, as well as a writer. Many Indigenous writers take up more dynamic, audience-focused forms in addition to more conventional literary practices. I'm thinking of Joy Harjo as an example. I believe her cousin Susan Schoen Harjo is as the same. Joy and Susan. They're friends of mine on Facebook. Another time we'll talk about it. Not right now. Got to keep reading. While acknowledging its shortcomings, Simpson is clearly not dismissing the power of writing as only a Western imposition, as I've heard from some community members and even some writers. We must acknowledge the inevitable limits of the literary, on the other hand, while also acknowledging the diverse ways that story, community, and belonging continue in both oral and inscribed forms. To honor our literary traditions is not to say that only those traditions have value, nor is it to adopt the hierarchy of value presumed by the settler societies and structures. But Indigenous literatures do something good and important in the world, and that is my focus here. Brilliant! I love it! Now, why am I bothering you with this? It's because I'm going to scroll down to this. We're going to go backwards in the book to pages 20 and 21. You ready? 20 and 21 in our books. Grab your book again, and I got to put my microphone down. Bear with me. 20 and 21. There it is. Here we go. Now, on pages 20 and 21, I'm going to the bottom of page 20. Says here, for many critics, literature is about written alphabetic texts with particular aesthetic qualities, a form of art that exists independent of social usefulness or value beyond particularly elevated notions of beauty. The idea of art for art's sake. Yeah. I'll tell you why I'm making that barfy face in a second. Let me keep reading. Once revolutionary artistic calls to arms amidst the suffocating, moralizing late 19th century and early 20th centuries of Oscar Wilde and his decadent contemporaries, today that philosophy seems to be encountered more often as an ostensibly high-minded stance for those privileged enough. Yeah, there's my barfy face again, sorry. Bear with me. To be disaffected and politically disengaged. Ooh, this is almost a blistering indictment of what we might call the liberal, ultra-liberal, I don't want to say washichu, woke culture that has absolutely no idea what it's like to be native or black or Hispanic or Asian American, whatever it is. Let me keep reading. Page 21. Let's see. So I'm going to read that sentence again. Oscar Wilde and his decadent contemporaries. Today, that philosophy seems to be encountered more often as an ostensibly high-minded stance for those privileged enough to be disaffected and politically disengaged. I prefer the definition of art provided by the Cherokee Appalachian poet Mary Lou Awiaka, art for life's sake, whereby rather than the wholly individualist expression of an artist's singular, often self-absorbed vision, art is explicitly, generously engaged with a larger network of relations, influences, and experiences, always with some measure of commitment to articulating indigenous presence in the world. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. By the way, the late, great author, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Toni Morrison also kind of had that barfy feeling when discussing art for art's sake. Why do we creators of color dislike the notion of art for art's sake? Why? Well, let me read some definitions that I conveniently devised for you. You ready? Here we go. Art for art's sake. A phrase, a literary and artistic movement that emerged from the late 19th century France, arguing that true art should have no social, political, moral, or didactic purpose, but instead be done for purely aesthetic reasons. Don't worry if you don't remember this. I'll post it later. Let me read it again anyway, because I'm messing it up. Art for art's sake is a phrase which describes a literary and artistic movement that emerged from late 19th century France. And it argued that true art should have no social, political, moral, or didactic purpose, but instead be done for purely aesthetic reasons. Now, you could probably already feel my thesis warming up, can't you? Why would people of color, especially us natives, find that movement odious? Why would we be disgusted by it? Let's read my, it's related to art for life's sake, which we read a minute ago, but here is my reaction, which I wrote when I was an undergrad several years ago. I call it artistic urgency. You ready? Here we go. Artistic urgency, a literary and artistic movement typically embraced by creators of color which asserts we have no business producing art unless it is to convey a message, be it social, political, moral, or didactic. It is opposed to art for art's sake, which it regards as pointless. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what to say or what to think. You decide for yourselves. Rather than that, I'm going to change the channel and talk about Mama Day. Now, I've probably already gone 15 minutes long, so I'm going to stop it here and I'm going to do part 3 of the video. You ready? Okay, I'm going to stop it now. Thank you so much for being so patient. Here we go. How are we doing on time? 15 minutes and 42 seconds. All right, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.